Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House. I am your host, Sandy Schoelles, but tonight it's going to be a pretty exciting discussion between Jim and Jennifer, and maybe I'll pipe in when I need to, but this is going to be good, and we've got quite a few people with us so far, and already one thumbs down, so we're doing something right. Yay! So let me start with welcoming you guys, and Jennifer, take it from me because she's the greatest at going over what we're going to do tonight, and
Oh,
it's going to be cool.
all right. Well, I'm really looking forward to our show tonight, Jim and Sandy, and we have quite a little variance of perception, I might say, that we're going to be
Yes.
discussing tonight. And it's like to exponentiate or not to exponentiate. That is the question. And we're going to start this night out with an article from Business Insider. Any hope of
Hmm.
keeping Earth habitable now requires sucking carbon back out of the atmosphere, a new study found. And then we're going to get into Zeke in his tweet that has apparently started a big furor, and this is in Twitter. So we're going to be going through some of the responses to his tweet. I'm trying to get to the top to read you the actual tweet itself. Climate scientist here. Stuff like this is dangerously inaccurate. If we stop emissions tomorrow, the Earth will remain at about 1.2 centigrade above pre industrial temps. If we get to net zero emissions by 2060 or so, we can still limit warming to well below 2C. This is a lively discussion around this topic, and this is going to be referencing that article from Business Insider that I just told you about. Then we're going to cut over to an article from Gizmodo. Climate
Oh,
scientists debunk point of no return paper everyone's freaking out about. And then we're going to go to a article itself because it's kind of like, is there warming in the pipeline or not? And how much warming can we expect after, if we get to a point of zero emissions, which is quite ambitious, right? Is there warming in the pipeline? A multi-model analysis of zero emissions commitment from CO2. And then we'll probably take a look at Zach Laib's latest animation that he just set out. And this is about the Arctic sea ice thickness, and it goes from 1979 to current day. And you can see how little multi year ice is left in the Arctic. So, with that, Jim and Sandy, let's go ahead and take it away. Um, Jim, I understand that you had quite a feeling about Zeke uh, Hausfather. Is that how you say his last name?
yes, he's a
Hausfather?
father.
Okay, well, um, and then we can kind of dive into the Business Insider article. But I understand, Jim, that you had quite an opinion about some of the responses that were going on this tweet thread, and I was wondering if you'd like to elucidate.
Well, first of all, good evening, ladies. Good to be here again. Um, I looked at that article with all the models and stuff like that. I spent several hours looking through that thing, and it's obviously too involved for us to really look at it tonight with the time constraints we have. But there's a couple takeaways. My impressions of looking at the article, and basically is they're testing various models is what they're doing. But let's make that clear. They're testing various models, up to about 6 or 10 or something like that. And by their own admissions, and the number of authors who contributed to this is extremely extensive. And by their own admission, they're basically saying model need work. So, and they were trying to look at, carbon sequestration, by the ocean, by the land, i.e. drawing carbon out of the atmosphere. And they present a whole pile of graphs, and other graphics. And this is something I have noticed time and time again. It's not just this article, but a lot of papers out there. And Zeke is doing the exact same mistake, and namely the role of the oceans. Now, this paper, they looked at the role of the oceans, and I would say from a passive point of view, how much will the oceans draw down? But as we continue to warm the planet, as sea surface temperature continue to increase, we are going to be stratifying the ocean. And when you stratify the ocean, that is a very bad thing for the planet. First of all, you don't have vertical currents, thermohaline flow.
Yeah.
Thermohaline flow is how we sequester carbon and heat ultimately from the atmosphere down to depths. That's going to slow down, if not stop. And we're already seeing evidence of that happening with AMOC and what's going on in the Arctic. So the point of that is eventually, and also don't forget, gas solubility decreases with an increase in water temperature. So at some point, the oceans are not going to be able to draw down CO2 if the surface temperatures keep warming up, and then you have the specific heat of water. Eventually, you're going to have some of the drawdown is going to stop, but then the gas is going to start outgassing back into the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So this notion
right.
of getting to ZEC, what they call zero emissions commitment, getting it to zero, is quite honestly a pipe dream. So some of the basic premise and assumptions are extremely flawed. And when you look at the models, even they have a regression model shows that the oceans drawing down the heat is going to be decreasing. They have it right there. One of them says, well, that kind of defeats the purpose, guys.
It just amazes me how they're not considering this. And the other thing about his graphs that struck me as just kind of weird was how tidy they are and the lack of exponentiation, and nearly everything is linear. Did you notice that too? His graphs are all very tidy, and then this is going to happen and this is going to happen.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was one of my immediate critiques that jumped out at me when I was looking through that paper. In fact, reading through the introduction, first of all, there's a lot of references to research, published research that's 10, 12 years old. Now, yes, hey, science, we build on what happens before. That's science. We learn from the past, adjusted, that kind of stuff. But that seemed to be forming the basis of what they're presenting. And there's a lot of IPCC references in there. IPCC is notorious for underestimating things, but not even including methane. And
that's right.
And they always make the assumption, as you just said, linear increase, and we know that is not the case anymore.
No, that's right. And I know that the IPCC generally just doesn't consider methane as a source. And therefore, he's not going to be considering methane as a source either, because it's not part of his equation. It's almost like we have an alternate view of reality, one in which methane plays a very big part, and one in which there is like a ginormous amount of methane frozen, potential ready to come out, as soon as it gets warm enough in the Arctic. And in this other version of reality, it's alternate facts, right? And so he's like living in an alternate facts reality, as far as I can tell.
Well, someone asked him on the Twitter feed if he considered methane, and he said he did, and he dismissed it. And I came very close to hopping in on there and saying, that is a mistake to be dismissive of the methane. For example, what we discussed in an earlier video we did about the ESAS.
Right.
So you got all the methane, you got the clathrates, you got the permafrost. There's just so much methane there, and yes, Igor and Natalia have been really been leading the charge on. There's been other people too. They've been in this for over 20 years, and Talia especially published a 2010 paper that, in my view, is kind of a seminal paper on the whole issue of the methane clathrates and the ESAS, and then dovetail that with what the two of them have been doing with looking at the terrestrial permafrost. And I have said before in my videos and other podcasts and stuff like that if you were to ask climate scientists what is the thing that keeps them up at night, it's methane. That's what keeps them up at night. Now, yes, methane is short-lived as far as
the... then it should, because if it doesn't keep them up at night, then they're subscribing to the alternate reality where the methane monster doesn't exist. It really is kind of... Is this politically driven? Because I've been seeing this syndrome, and people are generally pretty hardcore cut. They're either in the methane crowd or they're not in the methane crowd. And if they're not, they have this whole other set of alternative facts, and they don't even have the word exponentiation. And I've been seeing this with a lot of very reputable organizations.
Sandy, not hearing you.
We can't hear you, Sandy.
So I could come in. I have links to show you guys, and it's not nefarious, but it is links for who funds where Zeke works, and like we can look at this stuff and then take it with the grain of salt, as to why possibly his not that he's I'm not going to assail the guy's character. He's a climate scientist, but he works for a private corporation that is funded by a lot of different foundations, and we can look at that towards the end when we, because I know we're going to have a little bit of time for that. But it was an interesting and observance of Carbon Briefs funding and who Zeke works for. I pulled the company up. Okay. And I'm sorry, I have to forget to unmute myself. At least I didn't go on and on.
I do want to bring up this point, the political aspect that Jen just brought up. The IPCC is, to be blunt, a political body. It just is, because you have the administrators trying to placate, not just the scientists, but the countries and the leaders of the countries and the politics of the countries and whatever policies. That's why, signing on to the quote unquote Paris Accord, it was not made stringent. It wasn't made that, yes, you will definitely do these steps to reduce emission. It was sort of like advisory. It's a suggestion. You should probably think of doing, reducing your emissions. And that's it basically had no teeth, the Paris Accord. And that's why, they're talking 1.2 in that article. We're actually at 1.3, 1.4 now, above, pre-industrial. So 1.5, we're going to easily blow past that.
Oh,
and
we're going to blow right
we're probably looking at 2C. It's somewhere between 2030 to 2040.
Yeah,
longest
and
case
also
scenario.
Their sea level rise projections were very low, I thought. They were saying like 8 feet by, I don't know, they even had the year 2500. Who's ever thought of 2500? Certainly I haven't. I mean, that's like really far away. But all of their projections were really, really conservative. And I was just wondering,
Of course.
and then they make the point. I think Sandy too, it would be worth going through the Zach, whatever his last name is, his
Well, let's
actual
pull up the
tweet,
Twitter.
some of the comments
Zeke.
that he was saying.
Zeke, Hoff's father.
Zeke.
And he's Hoff's father, and he's a dad. See, He's a dad of a little one, and that also clouds judgment. That as much as he might not want to cloud judgment, he has a little tiny one.
Mm.
Okay, so I have got this. I'm gonna get this up. All right.
There's something else I want to mention because Jennifer brought up the sea level rise. It isn't just going to be coastal areas that are going to be inundated. It's any river basin drainage system,
Mm-hmm.
like the
Yeah.
Mississippi, for example. So
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have, it's 5 to 8 feet. That's going to go right up. Using the Mississippi as an example, that's just going to go right up the middle of the continent,
Yeah.
as it did during the Jurassic. And that's going to ruin, the aquifers, the, groundwater. It's going to, aside from displacing people, it's going to remove agricultural land. So you're going to have the flooding on, upriver, major river basins, and that will cut into interior of continent. Same thing will happen, for example, with the Amazon river drainage system. So it's not just coastal areas and islands that are at risk.
Well, you want me to go through this? We'll
Sure.
Yeah,
at least have it
it is
on.
interesting. Yeah.
It is. There's so many people that had a lot of. All right. So basically, the main tweet was climate scientist here. Stuff like this is dangerously inaccurate. If we stop emissions tomorrow, the Earth will remain around 1.2 C above pre industrial temps. If we
And
get
we're already
to
at 1.3,
net
1.4.
zero emissions by 2060 or so, we can still limit warming to well below 2C. Okay, and then he had the Business Insider article, which was what they were saying is, basically doomer and makes people give up and they don't want to do things, which I don't think is true because there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of things. So, Jen, did you want to talk about some of the comments that were given? Where would you like me to click for
Maybe,
you?
we might lose the thread too much if we kind of dive into this. It's really long, but I think
Uh-huh.
if we post the Twitter URL, of this particular
Oh, that'll be
thread,
in the notes.
then people can take a look at it. But, what I see, it's like he's really propping up alternative facts. And, and there's a lot of bargaining in there, but maybe that's just my take on it. So, for example, to elaborate a bit, if we held atmospheric concentrations of CO2
Mm-hmm.
constant, the world would indeed warm another zero point 0.5 degrees C or so. But if
Yeah.
emissions go to zero, falling levels of atmospheric CO2 counteract additional warming as ocean equib equilibrates with the atmosphere. I mean, it just seems like so much kind of, and I just don't see any of the self-reinforcing feedbacks that are currently unleashing. I don't see any mention of these things. He deals in a smaller universe where all those runaway climate conditions don't occur, you know?
Well, should I
If I
show?
can jump,
Oh,
if I can
of
jump in
course you
there,
can.
Yeah.
that's an excellent point, Jennifer. What is not taken into account is the thermal inertia of the system that has already been, shall we say, put in play.
Right.
There's a lot of thermal inertia. I
Momentum.
mean, we already did an experiment earlier this year, and people may not realize it. We had to shut down. We had flights grounded. So we had a what 4 to 6 week period where planes, the CO2 and the greenhouse gases from airplane was drastically reduced.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the CO2 levels, the ppms kind of came down a bit, but you know what the temperatures continue to do? They still continue to increase, albeit at a lesser slope, but it still increased. So we've already done the experiment. Now, granted, it's needs to be repeated and all that kind of stuff there, but we have an indication of what's to come. We have the thermal inertia in the system, and we now have, as you just said, We have basically all these positive feedback loops that are just kicking in big time. And the
Mhm.
and the big thing in all of this is the lack of sea ice. This is helping to exacerbate the methane feedback loop. And don't forget, when permafrost thaws, it's not just methane, it's nitrous oxide that's also added to the system. Nitrous oxide is turning out to be very much an extremely potent greenhouse gas as well. So you have not just CO2 and CH4, but now you have N2O. And water vapor itself is a powerful greenhouse gas. In fact, water vapor and CO2 working together exacerbate any heat retention that takes place.
Well, that's that's interesting. I don't know. Maybe if anybody in the chat wants to comment to that. I found some juicy stuff on Twitter though. I thought maybe I would just pull up a couple of things just to wet your whistle about people saying things like even if humans disappeared and all Earth's ecosystems regenerated to hold as much carbon as they did in prehistory, we would still land at elevated atmospheric CO2 levels, which would continue to trap heat and dissolve into acidity in the ocean. Carbon must go back in the ground. And just one more I liked was Jack. Of course, the other question is what geologic formations can hold gigatons of carbon and not leak, even if it were economic. From everything I read, it seems like we need rapid emissions drawdown and carbon capture and use plus storage, and even then we're still going over 2C. So what
That's
do
a
you
very good
think?
comment.
Well, yeah, I found a couple of these
That's a
because Jack,
very
Yeah.
good.
I like Jack. I think I'm going to follow Jack because he's an interesting fellow. And yes, he's young and he's made some good. He says even, well, we're not even sure whether large scale CCS and shale will leak through or not, right? So there's some conversation here that's fascinating. And but there were also people that were defending, and I'm not putting anybody down. Again, we're not being conspiracy minded here. We're talking
Yeah.
what is reality and what we might be not seeing because of other motives, such as funding, such as where this gentleman works.
Yeah, and also, Sandy and Jim, I'd like to cite the article that got this whole thing started that he was reacting to and saying, this is dangerous, right? This is the article from Business Insider. How more mainstream
Mm-hmm.
can you get than that? And it is any hope of keeping Earth habitable now requires sucking carbon back out of the atmosphere, a new study found. And the bullet points, even if the world were to stop emitting greenhouse gases right now, Earth would keep warming for centuries. New researchers suggest sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and storing it underground is critical solution. That's a type of geoengineering. Other climate hack proposals in the same category are far riskier. And so these people were basically talking about carbon sequestration and the volume of carbon
Mm-hmm.
sequestration that would be required in order to make a difference. And
But
they
it's going
did,
to
they
happen
ran
anyway.
they ran the numbers and
Mm-hmm.
basically they were talking about something like 31,000 carbon sequestration centers, all sucking carbon out of the atmosphere at some amazing rate. I can't find that right now, but it's
Well,
somewhere in there. Oh, here
all
it
our
is.
houses
In
will
other
have it.
words,
Yeah.
listen, no, here it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
other words, building 33,000 big CCS plants and keeping them
Wait,
running
is it the
forever.
front one?
That's what would be
Holy
required in
crap.
order to
Just to take out
in
what we've
order
And
to
done.
do
where
this.
do you get the energy to run those facilities?
Self reinforcing feedback loop. Oh
Yeah,
my
well,
God.
No, seriously.
There you
I mean,
go.
you're going to run the okay. So you're going to burn. Are you going to burn carbon to sequester carbon?
Well,
All
if you
right.
had, okay, let's
Yeah.
take that thought all the way through. What if you built an Amazon size, no pun intended, solar farm and only ran the thing when the solar farm was producing energy? Like amazing size solar farm and ran like a series of those things just off the solar farm, never ever dipping into the grid. Would that help?
That's
Well, the
interesting.
problem with solar energy is that to run large equipment, usually it ends up being inadequate, or if you are able to, you can't run it for a long period of time. Now, it depends on the inductance and how you set up the electrical system and that kind of stuff. So I'm not an electrical engineer, so that's probably best for the electrical engineer folks to address that issue. But because I thought about putting an inductance, system on my house, solar power, all that kind of stuff. And basically, I have an electric toilet, and the one of the things would have been to I call it a shitterator, but one of the things I wanted to do was to be able to run the electric toilet off of that unit. And in researching the unit, it basically said you can't do that. So because the amperage would be insufficient and that kind of stuff. So that it's still an issue for electrical engineers. I'm not an electrical engineer. Um, it may be possible, but from what I've seen in a lot of electrical systems, to get the kind of industrial level that would be required, it's probably not sufficient. But I could be
Yeah.
wrong.
And the other thing I wanted to point out too is that Zach said it was dangerous. Like, stuff like this is dangerously inaccurate, meaning like there's no need for that level of sequestration, or people who deal with concepts like this are dangerous, or people who have a gloomy outlook are dangerous. I mean, what do you think that he's talking about?
I think when he was saying this is dangerous,
Yeah.
he was criticizing those people who are of the opinion that we're past the tipping point.
Yeah, and
So
so
he's saying,
that
"Oh,
people don't get scared.
you're the gloom and doomers," and it's like,
Yeah, the doomers.
well,
Mhm.
it was like, well,
So now they're
if you objectively look at the data indicates, especially with all the positive feedback loops that are kicking in and kicking in big time and exponentiating, yeah, it's going to be a freaking runaway system. I mean,
yeah.
I did the video lessons from the early Eocene, where modeling basically indicates that we're going to hit 7 to 9 C increase by 2100, which is more than halfway to the level of warmth of the PETM,
Well, who'll
There
be
which
you
is
here
go.
when
by
the Earth.
then?
Well, that's just it. I mean, basically, we're on the path to a runaway hothouse Earth. That is what a lot of the other data that I'm seeing. I'm seeing more of the data that I'm seeing is indicating that than what Zeke is putting forth. There's less folks putting forth, oh, we can, nothing to worry about. We can get it under 2 and all that kind of stuff. I'm seeing a hell of a lot more saying the other directions. Like, because now a lot of the research is saying, oh shit, this stuff is running away because they're now
Yeah.
realizing everything is exponentiating.
But if they can do
And
this,
so you got
if well, sorry,
yeah,
I just
and you got the temperature increase, and you got the increase in melt rate, you've got the increase in the permafrost thawing, releasing more methane. I mean, you cannot ask for a bigger positive feedback loop than those right there.
Yeah. And I see that Zeke got quoted in Gizmodo.
right.
This is the article that is Climate Scientists Debunk Point of No Return, paper everyone's freaking out about.
Oops.
And this just came out on Friday. And I can see that Zeke Housefather got quoted, and this is what he says in this article. To be frank, the paper is crap that should not have passed any competent peer review. Zeke Housefather, a climate scientist and energy systems analyst, said, it's an interesting thought experiment, but its results should be taken with extreme skepticism until more complex Earth system models produce similar results. What do you think of that?
Well, okay, hey, this is what us scientists do. We debate, we argue, okay? We quibble over, and we argue quite vociferously on the interpretations of the data and the implications, etc. So that's part of healthy scientific discourse. Now, to be fair, Zeke does make a valid point when he says that the authors were basically business folks, and so it's out of their area of expertise.
Yes.
Fair point. Okay, okay, that's a fair point. But he mentioned something about, until these other papers show similar results. Look at the other 11,000 papers in the peer-reviewed journals, dude.
Oh, jeez. You're right.
I mean, seriously,
So-
there's so many
so-
papers that, and especially with the recent ones coming out, that are just showing how things are just getting crazy.
If you were going to
it's
write
hard for me to keep up on it. Every time I turn around, I'm seeing more and more stuff and saying, "Oh, this is going on. This is going faster," and it's like, whoa.
Well,
It's
my
just like
question to
nuts.
either of you is, what would you write if you were writing a letter to him? What would you write to make him understand that people are not? We need to understand. The rank and file need to understand.
I would say don't put your theories, on what you think is dangerous. Like, your opinions should follow the science and the science only, and not be influenced about whether people can handle it or not, or other motivations, because once you go down that track, if they're political motivations, monetary motivations, as maybe he thinks he's trying to help humankind not panic, so psychological motivations.
Right.
But once you are beholden to any motivations other than pure science and the understanding of the complexity of the interlocking runaway feedbacks that are baked in, and how much momentum is baked into the climate, and how much stuff is still yet to be realized. He doesn't take in any of this complexity, and I would say don't be beholden to anything but understanding complex science, period.
Yeah, well, Poppy made a comment
Well
about
said,
who he
Jennifer.
works for. Yes, very well said. She
I
always
I would
wins.
say to him, you need to look more closely and more detail at the methane question. You need to consider positive feedback loops. You need to consider thermal inertia. And then I would include in the letter a pile of references to various papers that address all those issues. And I would include the 2010 paper by Natalia Shakova.
Mhm.
I would just put that in there and say, you need to look at this and reassess.
Mhm. Yeah, reassess. And don't think that the models understand, because every single show we find, oh, the models haven't considered this relationship or this interlocking feedback or this influence. The models, we're just trying to approximate reality best we can with math. And that's models. And it's very hard to do because we don't understand the complexity of it.
Well, if I can speak to that, now this paper, that I sent to you ladies there, these are models in development. So there's some issues with that. But when you look at some of the other models, yes, it is extremely difficult to think of all parameters and the interactions between the parameters. That's the really difficult aspect to model and get correct. But in a lot of cases, especially the models that take the data that we already have and then they try to build models that project what's going to happen in the future. Those models have been extremely successful. And basically, they keep, you input your data, you develop your equations, you dump it all in. And once they get these models to at least a 95% reproducibility of what has already been observed and measured, only then, in some cases, they want to go 99%, but minimum is at least 95%. Once they get it to that, it's faithfully reproducing what's already been observed, what we have the data for, only then do they use it to extrapolate out. And those models that do that, when they extract out, that's when they come up with this like 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 degrees C by 2100. Now, why the variation between the different temperature ranges? The key thing is water vapor. The water vapor thing is the most difficult aspect to model. And so based on whatever assumptions they're applying to the water vapor parameter will yield different results. But the result is still the same. It is going to be an increase in the coming decades. And some of the models do take, okay, what if we drastically reduce emissions? Now comes the thermal inertia. There's still going to be an increase. That's just what the model, and these are the model, again, as I said, that have been able to faithfully reproduce what we already have observed.
Yeah, there you go. Do you mind if I take a walk on the wild side? I find this very
Please
interesting
do.
about Zeke. Just wait till you see this. I didn't realize, but do you know
Wild
Zeke
thing.
works for the Institute? Okay, he works for the Breakthrough Institute. They wrote the Eco-Modernist Manifesto. Guess who that is? Ted Northhouse and Michael Schellenberger, that shill for nuclear, the shill, who turned right wing, who lied. Michael Schellenberger is a fucking shill. So let me tell you, this is not clean one bit. This is not clean.
Yeah.
Holy shit. And we are bringing this to you tonight. We are the only ones.
You busted this out live, real time.
Yeah,
we are
real
busting
time.
this out right
So
now.
they
we are busting out freaking political motivations and seeing how they're manifesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Wow, that
Schellenberger,
is,
yep, Schellenberger is a
that
piece of
basically
shit.
takes this entire argument and puts it in the crapper.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then I have another piece. Wait a second. I've got the European Climate Foundation. Now, this is not so nefarious, but the funders also for this, and let me see, is everybody seeing this right? Yep. The funders for this are, and that's Carbon Brief, are among a couple of them are Bloomberg Philanthropies. Climate Works, maybe they're Big Greens, IKEA. It may not be all bad, for climate, but Rockefeller Brothers Fund. In academia, we looked for private funding. So Carbon Brief, but see, the thing that's troubling is Zeke is with Carbon Brief. So that makes me link all this uncomfortably to that Michael Schellenberger, guys. I don't know what the chat thinks of this, but it is not clean, and it's not clean. Plus, I was suspect because he's not affiliated with a university.
Yeah. Well,
Probably not.
if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck. So I think you busted this one out real time, Sandy. Congratulations.
Well, I
It
didn't
just
realize.
felt
I
like
think
that
this
to
is a
me. It
definite
just
bottom of the
felt
ninth
wrong.
Grand Slam.
Yeah. So when you think then what you're looking at on this guy's Twitter, and he's saying all this shit, and we're not we're not conspiracy theorists. We want to know what's behind all this that upset everybody. I mean, there's other people here that commented, like this woman, she says, I spoke with climate scientists about that flashy new study that says climate change has reached the point of no return and we need carbon capture. They say it's bullshit. But then, people go on and comment to her, and there's a real discussion. But now I'm going to put the link into where, where he really is, who he's really with. They are the
Right.
eco-modernists. Okay, I'm done with it. Let's go on. Even
mean,
Kate Marvel was in it.
Hey, there's nothing wrong. In fact, it should be encouraged to have healthy scientific discourse, as long as we understand what's behind and what the motivations are. But even that, alternative facts, there's no such thing. There's one set of facts. I mean, I don't need to let go of my phone here to know that it will go vertically downward to the floor. I mean, I don't need to know that. That's gravity takes gravity is an effect. It's fact. It's a fact. So you want to debate the interpretations of the data. You want to debate, what the long-term implications are. Fine. Let's have those debates. Let's have those discussions. But back it up with actual, real, solid data, not some questionable what-if modeling with developing 10 new models that's still being basically shaken out. And that's what that paper does.
Yeah, but
it's a shakeout paper.
I'm
hey, you want to develop, you want to test models? Great, test models. This is how we improve things. But make that clear, saying, okay, we're looking at this, and the other thing. And to be fair, the authors do say there's still some work that needs to be done with the model. Fair enough. I mean, that's how we progress. But when I see how the premise, and basically going to Zeke's, is using the IPCC as the template, if you will, well, that makes me call everything to question from that point on, because I am having had to deal with the IPCC. Let's just say I don't miss having to deal with the IPCC.
Yeah. Well, okay, guys, did we want to segue on to look at any of the we had that one research article from Copernicus, which I didn't know if you wanted to go through it all together, the warming in the pipeline, the multimodal, or is this just now?
That's the extremely involved paper that will take hours to dissect.
We're not dissecting it. Can you give us an overview? So if those that want to dissect it, just give us a little overview, because we have
that's what I've been basically doing with this is the paper that developed all these different models looking at ocean reduction of heat and carbon uptake
and the title the title of the article kind of says a lot, because it takes 3 lines for the title. An Earth system modeled shows self-sustained melting of permafrost, even if all man-made global greenhouse gas emissions stop in 2020. So Jim, this is exactly when you and I spoke a couple of shows back together. I posed a theoretical question to you, and I said, Jim, what if magic was real and we could just say, okay, from now on, we won't emit another greenhouse gas, period? What would happen? And what this article says is that sustained melting of permafrost will happen. And what that means is that we're already in runaway. We may not have taken off in a big whoosh yet, but it's start, and that means that all greenhouse gases stop today forever. Never another one was emitted. Still, sustained melting of permafrost would be happening.
And these are the guys that they put down because they were the business school guys.
Right, and they also they jumped all and said, well, permafrost thaws, it doesn't melt, which is true. You may have ice lenses in there, which ice lenses, of course, does melt, because that is a change in physical state. So okay, and I'm always making sure that people say permafrost thaws, not melts. But this
Okay.
goes back to and I remember responding to your very question a couple of shows back, and I basically said there's so much thermal inertia in the system, it's going to continue.
That's right.
I mean, I
And
stated it,
that's another
and I
word. Yeah, absolutely.
and I still hold to
100%.
that assessment. I make that opinion slash assessment based on the data, based on the basic concepts and principles of chemistry and physics.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw in this little comment here. Bill Franks. Hi, Bill. I just personally think we're privileged to be the last generation and to be able to see it at the end of it all. Oh my God. Now, see,
Well,
then if Zeke is watching this or any of his little people over there at the Eco Modernists, they'll be saying, oh, those doomers, they're just so horrible. They
yeah. Well,
hate us.
I'd like to tell Bill that I think that he's right. And, it is an honor to be here at the end, albeit kind of strange and terrifying all at the same time. But it's a profound time to be alive on Earth and to be awake enough to see the onset of the oncoming train, right? Train's not here yet, but it's definitely in the track, coming our way, and we're in the tunnel.
Woo
So we're
woo.
watching it. We're giving the blow by blow description as the train approaches.
Damn, I wish I had a train now. I didn't have a train set up here.
And don't forget with the warming
Uh,
planet, I mean, it's kind of throw in another
yeah.
little aspect here. It's what it's going to do to agricultural crops. Crop yields are going to decline because the conditions are not suitable for good crop yield, and whatever crops are harvested, the nutritional value will be far less. And another thing that you know we've been talking about the methane. We got the clathrate, the hydrate, and the permafrost. Rice, rice. When the rice paddies emit a lot of methane. And of course, then you got the fracking. But let's say fracking ended, ain't going to happen, especially with Biden. Biden's, I ain't against fracking, whatever. But fracking is going to continue, and I just don't see a reduction in the burning of fossil fuels. I'm sorry to say, I just don't see the political will from leaders to go that route. To be blunt.
Hmm.
I don't see the political will coming. All I see, at least with the new administration, is that I'm going to keep my eye on the EPA, the Department of Interior, and the Energy Department, and that's what I've been saying. That's what I'm going to be reporting on
Yeah.
with the administration. That's my main focus. Is that, for me. I don't know. All the other
Yeah.
channels can do what they want. I'm going to do that. And Jennifer, you can pick what you want to do. I mean, that's why we're so beautiful here and diverse and wonderful. And Jim, you're part of the family. And Antonio and Nick. And by the way, we're going to be doing a State of the Planet next Saturday, I hope. Everybody's been
Yeah.
asking. So, yes.
I
Let me
think
know
it
when.
would be worth it, Sandy, to put up Zach Laib's latest tweet.
Okay.
That
Oh,
is
I
yeah,
the
definitely.
sure will.
animation, and it goes
I
from
think I got
basically
it.
1979 to present day. And this is a sea ice thickness. So this shows you how much multi-year ice is left in the Arctic. And you can see as this thing runs through that it just is almost gone. So this is the multi-year ice, and they're not showing anything less than 1.5 meters, right? That's basically skin, right? That's just
Yep.
skin that forms in any given year. But the multi-year ice happens like 1.5 meters all the way up to, there's no yellow, there's no orange, none of that's on here. It's all in this very light color. And you can see the multi-year ice is almost gone. Pictures speak thousands and thousands of words. And this one here, we're looking at the death of the Arctic right there.
Yep, we
Yeah,
are.
the death of
That,
the Arctic.
that is not hyperbole at all. We are,
No.
the ice is disappearing, and when you have multi-year ice, obviously it's less likely to melt away, but also multi-year ice being thicker is also far more opaque, meaning that less sun energy can go through it than, say, thinner ice. And multi-year ice has a higher albedo factor than 1, maybe 2-year ice. So if you have a higher albedo factor, that's more heat energy reflected into space, we're losing the albedo. So that means more energy is being absorbed. You got more open water, more energy is being absorbed. That is now a major reason why the Arctic is now warming 3 times faster than the rest of the planet. The
That's
latest
right.
data is indicating that, at least in some locations, the Arctic is warming 3 times faster. Those locations tend to be on the Eurasian side of things, but still, it used to be, the Arctic
Yeah.
is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. It's now 3 times in certain
Yeah.
locations, which is
Yeah.
extremely
Another
alarming.
I saw that too, Jim, that it had gone up from twice to 3 times faster. Another, one of those things that increased, we went from the weight of civilization and the impact of civilization. It used to be equivalent to 4 atom bombs per second. Now it's equivalent to 5 atom bombs per second. So the weight of civilization on our biosphere is also going up.
Yeah.
And it's
I'm
pretty
also
incredible.
I'm working on a video segment now where the researchers examine what's called hysteresis of the Antarctic ice, and in a kind of to encapsulate what the concept of hysteresis is, it's basically if you look at the temperature increase from when the Industrial Revolution started and all the ice that melted, if you were somehow able to reverse that warming so that the planet's temperature was back to what it was before the onset of the Industrial Revolution, not all of that ice would, not all that, the ice that had melted into water, not all that
Mm-hmm.
water will refreeze back into that ice. That difference is hysteresis. And what they're finding is that the further we go down this path of the melting, the more and more difficult it is to refreeze all that melt back into ice, even if you were to cool
Oh,
things
yeah.
back down. And we're just
Okay.
going, and basically they ran the models out, and it's funny, I mention this because this Zeke guy is saying, 2060 we can do this other stuff. By 2060 in their model, the hysteresis at the point of no return with all that ice will not refreeze.
Yeah.
All that
Well,
all that
you know,
melted ice will not refreeze back. So
Yeah, and
and
Zach's
then they
got
ran this,
more.
so
and they
alternative
ran that
facts will only
model.
get you so far. At some point, your alternative facts are going to be proven false. And of course, at that point, it's too late anyway, you know?
Yeah.
And they further ran the warming up to 10, 11 C, and basically all the ice except for like a little spot around the South Pole from Antarctica is gone.
Now we've got the Chukchi right here, and we've got a graph, and this was
My buddy Rick.
yeah, he says very limited sea ice expansion in the Chukchi Sea the past week, most of that on the Alaska coast, while the Chakotay coast still open. And I'm going to pull this up so you could tell us about this graph. Either one of you.
What's telling is look what happened from during September.
Okay.
It bottomed out. That
Can you
means
guys
it
see
was
it well?
totally ice free.
Okay, nice and big. Okay.
For the
So
very
You can
first
see
time,
that it
also,
totally
it
wow.
didn't,
bottomed
yeah,
out.
it
Oh
bottomed out for
my.
No
like
ice,
a month and a
Wow.
half,
Yes, that's what
month
like a
and a
good
half
month.
in the
there.
Chukchi. Holy shit, we talk about the oh my gosh. We talk about the laptop,
And this
What
was
does
your
Zeke say to
backyard,
this?
was it not, Jim? Was this not your
What's that?
backyard? The Chukchi Sea,
The
studying it?
Chuck Chi was my office. Let's put it that way.
Oh, oh God. Oh, well,
that was
let me
that,
see
that
what
was my
else
that
he's
was
got
my
too.
office. We used to go up to Barrow because you had the Barrow Arctic Science Consortium up
Oh,
there. That was our jump off point So we had a warehouse up there, all our equipment and blah blah blah. But we used to go up there, a jump off point. Back in the day, we could actually get out onto the sea ice with our snow machines. Nowadays, you need a boat. Yeah, uh, but yeah, that's where we do a lot of our work. And not only were we looking at the sea ice, but we were also looking at surface currents. We're conducting heat budgets, all that kind of stuff. Um, I
Uh,
mean, we don't even get polynias anymore.
oh, jeez. Zach
Polynias
does
are
have
Russian
a
word
new
meaning
one.
open water.
Can
Oh,
can
I
you
was just
double
showing
click on
Zach's.
can you double click on the Laptif sea ice one so we can
Yeah,
see the
because he
whole thing?
said that it's now covering nearly all of the lap Dead
Because we
Sea.
can't
So,
see the bottom.
okay,
It
I'm
did
Can
pulling
you
bottom.
it.
can you open it like
Yeah,
the
there
graph?
you
There
go.
you
Yeah,
go.
as you can see, it did also bottom out, and again for a good solid
Yeah.
month.
Yeah. It's refrozen, albeit later than the other years, but it did refreeze, it looks like.
Thank God. It's
Yeah.
for little things.
But but still, it's when
Little
you
things.
have zero ice, all that
Yeah.
multi-year ice is gone. So you have basically
Right.
less than 1 year ice here, which can be a bit translucent. Now, granted, at this point now, what's this, November 15th? So at this point now, the sun is getting ready to set for good for a couple of months. So it won't be any solar energy input, which will allow the freeze up to continue along. But still,
Mm.
when the springtime rolls around and the sunlight energy comes back, the ice is more likely to melt. If it doesn't melt, it's more
Oh
translucent.
boy.
So some sun energy will penetrate through the ice and warm up the water below. I discussed that a little bit in my ice algae video. Where I talk about when you don't have the snow cover, and sunlight can penetrate through the translucent ice. So that's another factor. So having the ice there doesn't mean there's absolutely no solar energy input into the oceanic,
Mm-hmm.
the liquid portion at all. It will
Mm-hmm.
still take place. That's an important thing to remember.
Hmm. Oh, scientists warning. They follow that Berkeley Earth with which that scientist is in. So I've got to do a little bit more research on this Berkeley Earth because Zeke is in that one. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm gonna where I find what I find, and what people are doing. Zach has more. From 11 hours. Last month observed below average temperatures across central North America and excessive warmth in the Arctic. And then we had high temperature. Do you guys want to take a stab at this one?
Well, it's interesting over
Well, when I
basically the middle of the North American continent, it's a little cooler, and that's because of what the Arctic Oscillation, the Arctic Dipole are doing. But and if you scroll down, you can see there's a cold spot off Antarctica. That's the location we have Antarctic deep water forming. So it's going to be very cold
the
water,
melting
which makes the
station.
air above it cold. So that's not unexpected. Let's put it that way.
Jan?
So
Mm-hmm.
the North Atlantic is not the only place we have deep water formation. You have deep water formation off Antarctica as well.
Okay. Jan?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, like, that big blue ball in the middle of North America, that's a manifestation. As he said, the Arctic Oscillation, another way to think about
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
is the splitting of the Arctic vortex. This is a temperature anomaly map, not like
Right.
actual temperature, but temperature anomaly. So you can see where it's off. And there's a giant ball of cold air squarely over North America, and it's not in the Arctic. And as I always say, if it's down here, it's not up there.
Yeah, I
And
hear
that's
you.
part of the changing jet streams too, becoming more meridional in the flow as opposed to zonal. Um,
Yeah.
which when you have a tight polar vortex, the cold stays in the Arctic and temperate latitudes are not so cold. When you get the meridional aspect, then it brings down that cold air into lower latitudes, creating some issues.
Well, he's got some interesting stuff this week. I'll pull up one more and we can take a stab at this. And we're an hour. We've had some show. I really enjoyed this. I'm going to pull this one up and let's look at this.
It flew past.
Yeah, it flew past. But Zach Labe, this was November 13th. And he said it was statistically tied for the fourth warmest October on record since 1880. And I'm going to pull this up for you guys to talk about. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is
Well,
basically
it's
a graph
Jen,
from
Jen.
1880 to
Yes.
2020. And so we're looking at what, 40 years? That's 140 years of civilization right there. And you can see how quickly there was a little leveling out during World War II, but ever
Wow.
since 1980, we've been off to the races big time. So the last 40 years, we've been stepping on the accelerator as a civilization, and it's just going straight up. So I think we can
Wow.
expect more of the same. You can see that,
Uh,
it hadn't really taken, it was very flat, like through 1880 to say 1930. It was very flat. Then it kind of had a little blip, and then it was sort of flat again. So that was after the World War II, and then it's just boom. And that's very reflective of how our
Wow.
civilization has also taken off.
Makes
well,
sense.
a point that Jennifer made, which is important to stress on the previous graph that we looked at, was those were temperature anomalies, not so. It's like the deviation from I don't like to say normal, but from average, and so we can see that for most of the planet, it's warmer than average, and this graph is very telling that you see basically a spike starting in the late 1970s, continuing up through the present day. And part of it is the increased population with the increased energy demand, increased fossil fuel burning, and then you couple that with increased thermal inertia input into the system. And the warming is here to stay, folks, and it'll
Oh,
continue to go up.
never going to go away.
That's just
So at
that's
that
just the
lovely cheery note.
that's what you need to draw from the data.
Yeah. Yeah. True. True.
Don't shoot the messenger,
well, guys,
please.
no, there's no shooting any messengers, but it is just about time to say goodbye. This has been quite an evening. Jen, what would you like to impart our lovely, wonderful 96 fabulous people that are with us tonight? Do we want to have anybody ask any questions?
I would say, actually, I think I can sum it up. I would say, don't cling to alternative facts. Go for real facts, not ones that are motivated by anything but truth. And I think if you adhere to truth, that's the best that you can do. Then you can go from there. You have a solid foundation to understand things.
That's pretty good. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Jim?
I can't improve on that, so I'll let Jennifer have the last word. That's perfectly summed up.
Though we have actually Osama with a quote from Bob Marley. The people who are trying to make this world worse are not taking the day off. Why should I? We don't take the day off. We live this. So actually, that was a good way to end, guys. I've really absolutely enjoyed tonight, and I wasn't even going to be with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
It worked out. Yes, it's been an extreme
great.
pleasure. And hopefully we'll do a State of the Planet Saturday night. I've got a Tuesday night and a Thursday night show. And we're doing well. I like it. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for making our internet so much better. I could cry over that. All right, well, peace out, guys. I'm just gonna end the thing. I'm just gonna end it. I'm not gonna play any video. We are out of here.